So you just got yourself a solo stove, one of the little ones. You're excited to test it out. You go to use it, and then you realize real quick that you need tiny firewood. And then you start Googling. You see that there's like $75 bundles of tiny firewood you can buy on Amazon. You think that's kind of ridiculous. Then you go out and try to make some tiny firewood for yourself. Then you realize this is extremely tedious and time consuming. And then you start filling yourself with self doubt and wondering, what did I get myself into? And is this even worth the hassle? I'm going to go over 8 different ways that you can make tiny firewood for yourself. Odds are you have one of these tools already in your house. I'm also going to go over them by order from worst to best because they are not all the same, and some will take way more time than others and not be worth the hassle. I do have one that is a clear winner, and I'm not going to tell you till the very end. Just kidding. It's the loppers. Just get the loppers. If this is all the time you have, just get a big set of loppers, and it's going to do everything you need. Okay, let's take a look at all the tools that we're going to go over here. So the first one is a Leatherman Signal with the little saw blade attachment. Then we have a Mora knife bushcraft. Then we have an Estwing camping hatchet. We've got a little finishing wood saw. We've got a reciprocating saw with a wood blade on there. A classic Stanley hand saw. And then we have a 21-inch Sven saw, which is like a bow saw that you can take apart. And then we have the Fiskars Power loppers. These are 21.25-inch model specifically. And again, these are all going to be for making wood for a solo stove. This is the Mesa XL. So let's just get into it. Now we're going to run through this list. We've got 8. We're going to look at the worst to the best. And the worst is hands down a Mora or just any type of knife because... here's a little bit of my son's feedback as I'm doing this.
Dad, you know an easier way would just be breaking it in half.
I feel like he summed it up right there. Anything that you would be getting any assistance from like chipping away with this more a little bit to make it easier to bend and break, you could probably just break it on your own. So it's pretty much a waste of time. You can, for anything that you could be doing with this more, you can just snap it with your hands. And then for anything that's thicker, if you get started toward like a 1-inch or 1.5-inch log, then it's not going to help you. So I'd say just skip the camp knife unless you've got something that's like a machete, which is basically the same level as a hatchet. But even that is still not going to be at the top of the list. The hatchet is number 4 here. We'll get to that. Next up would be a cheap wood finishing saw. I got one of these for a project where I need to do some small wood chopping. I thought this actually might be pretty sweet for this because it flies through thinner pieces of wood. But it's unless your wood is like super dry, it's going to take a bit to get through, and it's just not really robust. So like if I was going camping or even just around the house, if this is the only thing you have, it's better than nothing when it comes to like an 1.5-inch log if you're trying to chop something that size. But it just takes a while. It wasn't as fast as some of the other saw options. In fact, this rated lower than in my book than a Leatherman Signal, which I thought for the size of blade that it had cut better than a wood finishing saw. But you are limited by the blade size here. It's only like a 4-inch blade or something. I didn't measure it. I just made that number up. But it's not very big. So it's good for maybe up to like 1 inch. But I noticed even just chopping like 3 logs with this, it immediately lost some of its sharpness. So I would have no confidence in this blade if I was going to be doing a ton of wood processing with this small of a blade. And the odds are, if you've got the money to splurge on a Leatherman Signal or any other pocket type of saw, that you've got the money for a Stanley hand saw or any other type of saw. So just get one of those. Next up, we've got a hatchet. This is like a camping essential. Everybody loves to have a hatchet unless you have to use the hatchet and you don't have the alternatives. I'd say it's better than a Mora knife or like a finishing saw maybe. You've got the chopping is actually seems to be a little bit less effort than some of the saws even. And you can get through some thicker pieces of wood just by chopping away around the edges and then making a spot that you can break it. But ultimately, you're still just chopping away, and it feels like a ton of wasted effort, and it's definitely not the most calorie efficient way of going about this compared to some of the alternatives here. Now, I do have to say that having a hatchet makes you feel cool, so that's important, and if you don't have one already, get a little hatchet. This is like a more of a processing, not wood processing. It's definitely not good for chopping wood. This particular hatchet is terrible for chopping wood because it's too narrow. But it's good for these sort of like chippy choppy activities around the campsite, or you can flip it backwards and use it as a hammer for your tent stakes or something like that. You can see in the video here that I've used the back end once I chop enough to use as a blunt object to kind of power through the wood and break it into pieces. So that is a useful feature here, to have that blunt instrument around. I always take it camping and I almost never use it, but when I do, I'm disappointed. So the next thing here is a Stanley handsaw, and this, I feel like it's a saw. It's very standard. You could also interject here any like the silky type saws or something like that. They're all going to be in the same category. Yeah, you can have some minor variations in how good your blade is, but they're going to have some of the same weaknesses, which is you have a single point of contact around the handle area, and then you got a long piece of metal out here that just wants to be all flippy floppy and move all over the place. And if you get it stronger, then it's probably more brittle and more likely to snap. And if you have it looser, then it's not going to snap, but it's going to wibble and wobble, and it's just not fun. It is obviously capable of cutting. I don't think in this one, I'm using it to show that you could get through some bigger stuff, but it takes a while, and it's not fun. And, it's not the best option here. The next one is a Sven saw, and this is a step up from the standard hand saw. There's tons of these. I mean, it's just a bow saw, so you can get cheap ones of these. I like this one because it folds down. It's a lot easier for gonna bring it anywhere. The only reason I would bring this is if I knew I was going somewhere that had a low firewood concentration for like a regular campfire, and I was going to have to potentially move dead wood that had fallen significantly away from my campsite in like full tree form that other people hadn't got to because it was too difficult. And I knew it was going to be chopping up some dead wood and then putting them into like 6-inch pieces, and then I'd let the fire burn them in half to make them small, or 6-foot pieces. And then that sort of situation, it's super handy if you're going to a very well camped area that there's not going to be firewood in your immediate vicinity. You want to get some bigger logs from farther away. It powers through small pieces of wood. You can get through big pieces of wood. With the bow saw design, you can potentially get 2 hands on there. The blade is fixed on both ends, so you don't have the wobble issue. It's a mass. If you have the option to get a bow saw compared to anything that's only fixed on one end, get the bow saw. This one is not the cheapest option, but there are cheaper ones that break down. There's like a Collins one that's $40. There's some other ones out there that are more too. At the end of the day, they're all bow saws, so you're just kind of arguing over some nuances of the form factor. But yeah, like if you can get your hands on a 21-inch, then you can process some big stuff. It's overkill for this, but it's faster than pretty much all the other saw options that are out there. And then the next one is going to be a reciprocating saw, and this is if you're at home, processing at home for this, and you got a reciprocating saw and a wood blade, and you just want to go for it. It's going to chop through pretty quick. It is a little bit frustrating sometimes with the smaller pieces of wood to kind of get them fixed in place. A lot of times when you're using a reciprocating saw, whatever you're cutting is kind of fixed, like you're cutting through some drywall or some wood that's part of your house, and it's all fixed in place. So when you've got a moving target, the reciprocating saw makes things less fun. But it's obviously a saw, and it's doing all the back and forth stuff for you on its own. And so it's going to beat every other saw that's out there that you have to do on your own. There's no way anything's going to beat with electricity and saws. So if you only have to go the saw route, get this. One thing I don't have here is a circular saw. I considered pulling that out, and I just didn't even bother because it just seemed like the size logs you're doing with it, it's going to be faster than a reciprocating saw for sure. But your wood's not going to be easily fixed. And so you're going to be holding it with one hand, the wood, and then the saw with the other. And it just seemed like a great way to just lose appendages. And I'm not about that. So I took that off the list here. But worth noting. All right, final best way to do this, hands down, is a good set of loppers. These have a lot of leverage. These are the 21.25 inch model. I've had that for 10 years. I have never sharpened them. And they cut and cut and cut and cut and cut and cut, and they're so good, and I love them. And I love them even more once I tried to make wood for my little stove thing, because up to like 1.5 inches, which is the max you're going to be shoving into this thing here, you set it down. I make like a little platform so that the loppers I have 1 foot on one of the handles, and then I have the blade raised up about 6 inches, and then I'm holding the free handle with one hand and then feeding it logs through it, and you just chomp, 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 chomp. It's faster than the reciprocating saw, than any type of saw would be, and it's just the fastest, best way to do this, hands down. If you don't have anything already, this is what I would get. If I was going to go camping, like car camping, obviously I'm not going to carry a pair of loppers or a Mesa XL into the woods of my own volition. But if you're going car camping, just bring your loppers. Like, just bring them, and then you can get some small pieces of wood and just process it there, and you're not going to have a problem. I think the loppers are so easy that if you do have access to twigs, then there's absolutely no reason to buy your own type of wood, like any of that pre-made wood stuff. It's just really fast to process, really easy to do, and not that much of a hassle. So those are all the recommendations that I'd have here. Let me know if you have a better way that you can think of. I'd love to hear it. If I missed something, let me know in the comments. Or if your experiences are different here, please subscribe. We're going to have a lot of cool content coming here. The main focus is on how to camp with what you have already, not spending tons of money. I think any of these things that I just presented will work. And odds are, if you own a house or have been alive or have ever gone camping before, you have one of these things around. So there's no need to spend extra money on stuff for this. That's my philosophy here. And hope you have a great rest of the day.